Welcome to the Be Here Now Guest Podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
You're preparing for a dance/dharma retreat. Was that one and the same thing?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is actually a real interest of mine, is kind of bridging the practices of Bharata Natyam, which I've been doing, for 35 years, which is a form of South Indian classical dance. And it's a devotional practice of Hinduism with Zen training, really. Because for me, they're actually just two sides of the same coin. And it's kind of recently that I've been really kind of bringing that into the forefront. So I've been doing a lot of just teaching of sort of stillness with my dance students, and then essentially teaching people how to dance in Zazen, sitting in stillness. So for me, that's like interesting. That's my practice, is just kind of the exploration of those two things. And so to really put it, to make that connection is interesting for me. I've been doing that in my artistic practice as well. So recently I did a show called Sky Dancers, which was looking at the Dakini motif in Buddhism. And we literally had 8 people sitting on stage doing Zazen throughout the piece with Indian classical dance. And it was sort of an experience for the audience. They were actually as taken by their experience of the stillness as they were of the very complex movement. So that was really interesting to me, and that's kind of an ongoing exploration.
Yeah. And I don't know if I don't know if I'm familiar with that connection being made, like Bharata Natyam and even like just the sitting of Zazen put together. How did you find that? How did you kind of locate that connection?
Yeah. Well, I was born in a Buddhist family in Sri Lanka, Theravadan Buddhist family. So, Buddhism has always been an interest of mine. And then, went to school and was in religious studies and specialized in, kind of Hinduism and Buddhism. And so there was this interest in it. But frankly, I was never really a practitioner of it. It was more a kind of conceptual and existential interest in it, not so much practice. My husband actually had been practicing Zen for a very long time. And so it was kind of in my field for a long time. And then actually Hogan Roshi from ZCO came to Vancouver, and they would often, him and Chosen, stay in our house. And I was very used to supporting teachers. It was part of kind of the background that I came from. So I would do a lot of stuff like hosting teachers, feeding teachers, but actually not necessarily sitting. I had a very deep and intensive dance practice going on for a long time. And then one day, actually, I sat, when Hogan Roshi was here, I just sat a Zen retreat, just a weekend thing. And I was like, oh, this is a body practice, right? Like, actually, I'm completely familiar with this, and until that time, I had sort of had this idea that meditation was something that happens up here. And for me, that was completely uninteresting compared to, the amazing experience that I was having practicing Bharata Natyam, which is this full body meditation, really. So when I realized, that's actually what Zen practice is, it really became compelling and interesting for me.
Yeah.
I think I was just confused actually about what meditation, what sitting meditation was. So yes, for me, they're both body practices. They're both expressive, they're creative. It's all of these connections. Yeah,
certainly. And I think I don't fault you for thinking that there's like a more of a heady component, because there's so many books that are that describe philosophical, often complex reasons behind Shinkantaza or kind of getting into Zen philosophy, and then and then yeah, the sitting component can put you right in your head, and what am I supposed to do with my thoughts, or what am I supposed to do with this and that? And then what I think is wonderful is that you were able to identify the movement within the dance element of the seated position, and the bodily experience of that. And that's something that I try to remember too, is that like whether or not I feel like my mind is doing the right thing right now while I'm sitting Zazen, I think that, well, how does my body feel? Like, is my body kind of like, how's my posture? Is my body kind of participating? And so that's a wonderful thing that you were able to do. And then yeah, like I appreciate your for a while your connection, like where you're like hosting people within Zen community, you're making food for them, you're really very closely, intimately connected. And for a while, you just wanted to kind of focus on your dance element, and with a wonderful reason. And the Bharata Natyam has a very I'm not like wildly exposed to it. I've watched some videos of it, and I understand kind of some components of it from a observational, from an outside view. But I mean, even like the eyes, there's like a lot of dancing with the eyes. It's like very intricate, hyper intricate. So it seems. And do you bring some of that awareness to when you sit Zazen, and then vice versa? Do you see some Zazen or some Shinkantaza components influencing your approach towards the performance of Bharata Natyam?
I mean, absolutely. Definitely. I often go to Sesshin before I have a performance as a way of training in dance. It's become very much the two things are training. I mean, the basic practice of Bharata Natyam is, paying attention to the body in such detail that there is actually no space for thought. So, essentially dancers can't think. You're doing, the traditional repertoire, which is called a margam or a path, literally, is a 2-hour solo concert. So with incredible amount of, moves and details and expression happening, you cannot think, and so the actual practice and training of Bharata Natyam is not thinking. And so, and the idea, the expression is not personal. It's actually, kind of emptying out. It's a process of training that empties out so that you can source a much bigger palette than personal experience. And so for me, that's exactly what we're doing when we sit Zazen. So it was familiar in that level. Like, it wasn't hard for me to sit down and not think because I had been practicing that for a very long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
2 hours of a solo performance, 2 hours of doing really anything is an awful long time, but 2 hours of doing a solo performance that is intricate, that is very, very intricate, that is in rhythm, that is in front of people, is quite a feat. And I'd imagine, just because of our human nature, and I think about this too sometimes when I was kind of speaking to you earlier with Zazen, sometimes like, oh, am I doing this right? Oh, did I sit with a thought for like a little bit too long? And can I get a little judgy about my inability to do this, quote unquote, right? When you are doing Bharata Natyam, I'd imagine there are some moments where a movement was slightly out of place, or maybe you miss a component of rhythm. What is something that you have applied towards recovering and or moving on from slip-ups in dance performance that you've maybe applied into Zen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, one of the practices is the non-abiding mind. So, when you're doing any skilled craft, it's very interesting to see what happens in the mistake, right? So we stick with it. We can't. And then, of course, if you're in performance, it's not helpful to stick with your mistake. You have to move through it and get on to the next, whatever you need to attend to. You can ruin an entire performance by fixating on a mistake that happened 3 minutes ago. So a real training of Bharata Natyam is the non-abiding mind, is just to keep moving. And that's in terms of emotional. They have what's called Navarasa, which actually the Tibetan Buddhist tradition uses as a practice, which is what they consider to be the 9 flavors of human experience. And it's an actual practice where you bring up very fully, say, the feeling of joy, and then you bring up very fully the experience of anger, and you literally experience it and then drop it. and you move to the next experience. So this idea of actual real practice of flow is obviously very relatable to Zen, or if you're sitting there and you're fixated on a thought, how do you move that? In Bharata Natyam, it's always just realigning with the body. Actually, that's the basic instruction, is just come back to the body, and, which is sort of what Zen is too, right? So,
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and then I'm just kind of curious about this component too, because like there is this, like with your I believe it was called the Sky Dance performance that you did recently. There was this I mean, I'll just say it from an outsider's thing of like a juxtaposition. It seems like there is this the people that are sitting Zazen on stage, and then you have someone doing these movements on stage as well. And I understand this, that there's a correlation between the two, but just for my sake, because I've spoken with some other people that have specifically done have a Zen practice, but also have had and continue to have dance in their life, and they have like, and they see the dance of the stillness of sitting and of just sitting. And I was wondering what your interpretation of that is. Like, where do you see the movement in sitting?
Well, I mean, we see that as thought. I mean, in thoughts, I mean, they're constantly, everything is moving, right? There's really, everything is moving. I mean, it's your thoughts, your sensations, your pain, your joy, there's your emotions, your feelings. When you look deeply, there's nothing that's still, really. I mean, at a deeper point, perhaps everything is still, but this movement is just a huge part of the experience of Zazen, is that, you're not sitting there like a solid lump. That's pretty easy, and that's kind of wonderful, isn't it? I mean, and the connecting with just the aliveness of that experience, right? Without kind of like, oh, I'm alive. So just that juicy, wonderful aliveness, which is movement, is the practice, and of, Zazen, like whether we get upset. So it's more about like noticing the movement, not necessarily the content of like what's moving, right? But the movement. And so that is interesting. And of course, in dance, we have to kind of really be connected to the still point, in the midst of all of that movement.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of center to rely on.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if anything, I mean, there must be something really fantastic about experiencing this, because like I don't have experience doing like a 2-hour long routine that doesn't allow space for thought, and yet you are there doing it, and so there is this kind of you kind of plumb the depths of what is there, through that, which I think is interesting, because like there is a center, and yet the center moves, but there isn't like but you at the same time lose yourself, right? Because you're in complete your vehicle for what's being done.
What's moving, through you. I mean, that's the thing, is that, like, who is this? I mean, any time that you shrink and become, here's Enryu, there's going to be a mistake, or there's going to be a constriction. So the point is to be very vast, and I mean, that's just an interesting exploration as a dancer. What are the boundaries of your body? I mean, that's very hard to tell when you're moving and when you're totally immersed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then did you, I mean, just with meditation practice, it sounds like the sitting component happened with your exposure through your partner and through having Zen teachers come into your life. But did you, I mean, you grew up in a Theravadan Buddhist family. Did you sit when you were doing that? Was any meditation?
Yeah, I mean, I had done a lot of like sort of weekend retreats, and I have done a lot of meditation, but and we did a lot of just traditional lay practice that you would do in a Theravadan community. So we used to go every year to Sri Lanka when I was a child, and my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents, I mean, everyone has been sort of supporter of the Dharma, really. I don't know how many generations. So, but what that literally means is often supporting a temple, feeding monks and nuns, so it's a very different type of practice, actually. The focus is not on meditation. It's much more on generosity, actually. And, it's much more laying the foundation, which I often find actually with Buddhism in the West, is that it's so focused on meditation. and that, I really like that about ZCO, and especially like Chosen Roshi seems very committed actually to the importance of the precepts or practices like generosity or loving kindness, and actually helping you actually orient in a way that makes it possible to sit Zazen. Like, I think there is something very important actually in, the early Buddhist teachings around the emphasis on these other things, not just this kind of personal experience of meditation practice, which can become, a self-centered pursuit if you don't orient towards it in the proper way. So I do feel kind of grateful that I was in a stream of a lot of other things before I sort of hit the cushion. I didn't feel like I had to deal with so much, now that I'm doing a little bit of teaching and stuff, I can see the obstacles that people come up with in the West, students not having that sort of a background,
And is I don't know, antidote might not be the right word, but is the way to help people open up to that exercise of gratitude? Do you have like certain things that you like to do that kind of help them get out of to broaden their experience within Buddhist practice? Like, is there something that you like to offer to people, or is it much more case by case?
I mean, it's case by case, but at the same time, I really do like, because also I've been involved, as I say, in training in a devotional practice of Hinduism for so many years, that the idea of devotion actually is just the importance of pointing the finger away from yourself before you even start. So these practices of, bowing, or, in the Tibetan tradition, I really respect all the preliminaries, in order to actually come towards the cushion is very significant, actually. And so, it might be just suggestions like, don't just bow in sort of a rote way, like how do you bow? Like, what are you doing? Like, do you understand all the devotional gestures that are built into the Zen form? Or are you just kind of doing that as a, whatever? It's really important, right? How you view things, or do you see the beauty in this room? Do you open your eyes to the altar? Do you see what's being presented in a statue? Like these are really important qualities for me.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I totally hear that. Like, where if you're participating in the bowing and the sitting and the maybe the giving your attention in an appropriate way to chanting or to listening to a Dharma talk without, you could do that for sure. But there is this thing of like, well, can you give yourself to the devotional element of this? Can you remember the empowered qualities of the bowing, like what it does, and kind of meeting your body where it is when it's doing that too, because your body's really showing up for you when you're doing those bowings. No, that's wonderful. And then I know that too. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where this fits in the timeline for your experience, like as you were kind of going the Buddhist path and coming from the Theravadan community into Zen. But I know that you have, for your dissertation, I believe it was for your master's in Asiatic studies, you were studying Sanskrit, and you did a translation of a Buddhist poem. And I just was wondering what your experience was like with that, like having had grown up in a Buddhist community and having that had be a major through line in your life, what that experience was learning Sanskrit and translating this poem.
Yeah, I mean, I've just always been really interested in reading spiritual texts. And, from the time when I started at McGill, when I was 18 or whatever, I kind of realized, the whole thing around translation, pretty quickly, like, wow, 5 different things on this text, and they're saying very different things, and it's really being filtered through a particular lens. And so that was just always really interesting to me, interesting enough for me to say, I would like to learn the language. Like, I would like to actually see, and, the complexity of a language like Sanskrit, right, is just interesting. Like how, and, the translation, say, of a word like suffering for dukkha or something, like, just what is the kind of, in some ways, what is the fallout of a translated word, and how people actually receive a teaching. And so, yeah, that just became really interesting. And so that's what I did is I just, I can't say like, I'm a Sanskritist, but I dabble, it's just such a world, right? Of, I don't know. Are you also in doing studies in languages or, yeah.
Oh, no, I appreciate them a great deal, but no, I'm not much of a linguist, or not much of
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
translator.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, just the interest in translation. And then, this poem was a poetic rendition of the life story of the Buddha, which I find is like such an interesting story as a kind of teaching instruction manual, really, for practice. So yeah, I think I just was interested in translation, interested actually in tackling something as difficult as Sanskrit. I tend to kind of like challenges, like academic challenges as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'd imagine, I mean, learning Sanskrit is, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like it is that is quite an undertaking as far as like, learning it from, I mean, from my life, growing up in America, like having English as my primary language. I think that Sanskrit is a big difference from what I'm used to. And then for you also just to be able to connect with such an important root language for you, and then to at the same time you apply that towards translating. I believe it's called the Pajja Kudamani,
Yeah.
and to be able to really spend a lot of time with a text and really plumb it and understand what the different variations of a word can be, and participate in that way. It must be very powerful. And I was wondering, did you remember getting anything out of that in particular? Like, was there something that you really sat with, like a chapter or like a component of it that you really sat with, or that really helped deepen anything in particular for you?
Well, you know how you often go through experiences and they're just kind of painful at the moment and you're wondering why you're doing them? Well, that was kind of my experience of that master's. I was just like, why did I do this? It's just a lot of work. It's so difficult. And, for what? Because I was actually, the text had never been translated. So in some ways, it's really difficult work to do the first translation of an untranslated text. It's easier to do like the second or third. It's more fun, because then you have something to work with. But it's only in retrospect that it became like, oh, that was a really important process now, well, for one thing, Sanskrit is one of the major languages in the dance tradition. So it was very helpful in terms of my ability to translate dance songs, and know, oh, this is the lyrics. So on that level, that was important for many reasons. But also now, when I'm actually just studying the Dharma in a deeper way, just to be able to look at a word and be like, okay, well, I know that this word has a lot more valence than just what is being given here. And this is interesting to explore. So, yeah, I mean, I think nothing in your life that you do is really wasted, right? It's kind of a mystery why you come to things, why you find yourself. And sometimes when you're in that place, it's very unexplainable, but then somehow, everything that you do allows you to deal with what's happening for you in the moment right now. And so that's really obvious to me that all these paths that I went down were rich in now what I can offer to people. Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. You saying that, there are maybe not, we might perceive them as wasted moments, but they might actually have some, with hindsight, or maybe just with the right frame of perspective, they might be an intricate part of your life and what it needs to, what you're here to do, or whatever, however you wish to interpret it. Because I certainly kind of look back, I'm like, man, I didn't need to play that many video games in high school, or or whatever it is. But then you live a life later on, and maybe there's some things that you glean from that, or that you now have a new appreciation for, or something like that. So sure. I really think that's wonderful. And then and I know that so I had a couple of places I wanted to go, but I wanted to kind of go back slightly, because I think that you had mentioned that through your dance, it is a devotional practice, and it is within a Hindu tradition. And I was wondering, like, do you identify as someone that practices actively, like a Hindu a faith practice, or do you think that, or is it something that is a little less like concrete than that, as far as like how you identify or how you approach it?
in relation to dance or to dharma or to
or like
both?
just like
Everything. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
would you say
Yeah, I think faith is a big part of my practice, just period,
Mhm.
that, yeah, the deeper I go into Zen, I think that, it really becomes a practice of faith in some ways and mystery. So, this sort of the concrete things, there's just, yeah. So I mean, I don't really see a big separation, as I said, anymore between these streams. They
Mm.
just seem like different doorways into the same thing.
Right,
And
right.
that's interesting to me, in many ways, like how many doorways there are in life into the same thing.
Right.
So yeah, yeah,
And they might seem like they're in like completely different buildings, but they're actually like these doorways are all kind of somehow related.
yeah,
But
yeah.
with your Hindu practice, I mean, was there because I understand that there are so many different ways that can be manifested. There's so many different ways that can be expressed, and different deities or different figures can be of particular focus. Was there someone in your family, or like was there a figure in your family that was of great focus growing up, or was there someone a figure within the Hindu uh, uh, structure, the religious structure that you have found that has like a particular significance to you, whether it be like any of the deities that are available?
Well, I think I was just, it was very weird. The first time I ever saw a statue of the god Shiva was, I think I was like 15 years old, and I was like working in some bookstore, and across the street there was this art gallery, and they just had a picture. I don't know if you've seen Nataraj, the dancing god. Uh, it was a little sculpture. It was a kind of like a sculpture store. I had no idea what that figure was, but it just caught my attention. It was one of these mysterious things. Didn't even know after it caught my attention what it was, but I ended up buying it, sort of as if your future is pulling you forward into. And so this statue sat in my room for years before I ever got into dance. And so it's interesting to me. I think I had an attraction to the images in Hinduism, the sort of marvelous, wondrous aspects of cosmology there. And I did take a class called Images of the Feminine in Hinduism and Buddhism at McGill University. And that was kind of this celebration of a lot of these images in some ways. And that was where I first saw Bharata Natyam being performed. And I just remember it struck me just like things do that are going to steer the course of your life in a completely mysterious way, like just this huge sense of kind of resonance with something for an unexplainable reason. Because I wasn't a physical person at all, but I remember seeing that and saying, oh, I could do that, which was a really weird thing to think even. And then, like a total mystery, I ended up hooking up with like the best dancer in Canada without knowing anything about the form. I mean, I could have easily hooked up with the worst, and I wouldn't have known the difference. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of just this interesting, mystery, but attraction. Yes, I did have some kind of attraction. And then, of course, the teachers of this form are incredibly deep and mature teachers. And so that just continued to kind of keep being a compelling interest for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing moment that you saw that statue, and you felt compelled to not just look at it, but you purchased
Buy
it.
it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's very strange, actually.
Yeah, and for the dance component to almost kind of give a glimpse into your life as a dancer, and to the power of that, and then you're situated where you are, where you have access to these people that are very deep and mature, vetted dancers within this community, and you have them as your guides in this way. So it's a very, very powerful, wonderful thing that you said yes to in a really great way. So I'm just, that's a very powerful moment. And then on the figure note, on the like the religious figure note and the iconography note, I know that for Great Vow and for the Zen community of Oregon, well, I suppose like for the monastery specifically for Great Vow, there is the Jizo. There's like a Jizo garden, and Jizo, the Bodhisattva, has a very prominent visibility and I guess place there. And I was wondering about your experience with like Jizo as just someone that's like very much visible in that community. If you have an affinity or an appreciation for Jizo that you might not have had before with your Buddhist experience, but also too, if not, or in addition to, are there other bodhisattvas that, you know, as you've been becoming more familiar with Buddhism and deepening that, have other bodhisattvas kind of taken a more prominent role for you and have you've identified more greatly with?
Yeah, I mean, there's something so completely whimsical about Jizo as it's presented at Great Vow, and it really is just a manifestation of Chosen Roshi, you know, all over the place, because she's such a playful, whimsical person, really. But I really like the idea of, you know, the Sanskrit name for that is Shittigarbha, which is earth womb. And also that Jizo is the protector of women and children. You know, I have a child. And so, yeah, this whole kind of, the journey of Jizo is like really interesting, and not a figure that I was actually really aware of until I went to Great Vow, but is very dear to my heart now. Many bodhisattvas there. I mean, I once again, I really like iconography, and they have some wonderful statues, like, and I don't know if you've practiced there, but entering Lizendo, you know, they have a huge Manjushri. And I often find that those symbols that seem sort of androgynous, it's hard to tell, male, female, what are they? But are often brandishing, you know, various tools to cut away at delusion, are very similar to me to the whole Hindu pantheon of kind of the female, male, what is this, you know, manifestation of the universe with multiple hands and all kinds of functions. So yeah, I don't know if I'm like, I have a particular bodhisattva, but just that whole array of kind of wondrous imagery and possibility that they portray for your own life is just something that really attracts me. Yeah.
Certainly. And I think it's wonderful that it offers a window into the Hindu practices, or the cultural and the identity that you have within that world. There's that door again that kind of opens up, where it kind of shows you that there are some like reflections here, and it helps kind of situate you. And after all, like the functions that you're talking about of like the Manjushri's sword and things like that are used to cut through delusion, to offer more truth, and to make those things more accessible. Yeah, and then I watched a video on Great Vow's YouTube channel of the Jizo Garden, and it really is that earth connection to the Bodhisattva is really kind of celebrated, because there's so much moss all over, and there's just like, it's
magical.
a really, yeah,
really amazing, that forest. Yeah, it's wonderful. You know, yeah.
And I know that you are in the capacity that you offer your teaching and instruction. You're on a remote basis, but also you lead session. You can co-lead session retreats sometimes. And I was wondering, like, what your experiences have been doing the remote work, and also the in-person kind of extensive practice periods where you are in with people on location. I was just wondering what your experiences have been like with both.
Yeah, so I did a little remote stuff during COVID, but I'm not a huge fan of like remote Dharma teaching. And so I actually don't do any remote work. I have been going actually in the last 10 years a lot to Great Vows. So I'm usually there like 4 or 5, 6 times a year I've been doing these now like two helping assisting session like twice a year, and then I tend to do 2 or 3 other session as well. So most of my time is actually at the monastery practicing with people. Yeah, I just feel like it's, you know, Zen is so much about intimacy, and there's just something about the screen that is different for me. So yeah, I don't really have a comparative perspective because I don't teach dance or dharma on the screen.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you'd have
Yeah.
to, especially with dance. That's kind of like especially with the type of dance, the
Yeah.
Bharata Natyam,
Yeah.
the in-person quality is for sure important. Well,
Yeah.
and then and I know that there's, I believe it's called the Shrine of Vows. Is that right? That's on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
grounds.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's on the grounds of the Great Vow as well. And if I understand it correctly, there is this, there are reasons behind making the vow in the
Mhm.
first place, and often it's, whether it's for the well-being of all sentient or all living beings, or basically whatever is of importance to the vow taker. But there is this like physical manifestation of the vow, where that you can paint on a stone, or think that there are some other options where you can maybe make something with cloth, and there's just some way to make a physical gesture to manifest that vow, or at least the fact that there is a vow. And I was wondering, if you don't mind sharing, but also too, like just your general experience with the Shrine of Vows, and just seeing if there's something that you have offered to that monument yourself, or also too, if there's something that you've noticed with visitors as they come, with how their interactions are with that space.
Yeah, I mean, I've made many vows there, some of them actually physical, some of them just being there. I mean, as you say, there's just something about going to a space that is filled with, with vows, with intentions. It doesn't really matter what your own vow is when you're in the space, right? It's vow, just in kind of a broad way, to be in a space of intention. In some ways, the specificity of it is important, but also not, because a lot of these vows are in some ways impossible vows, right? Like, oh, we're going to save all sentient. I mean, these are, in some ways, it's a wonderful thing to make in sort of almost impossible statement. How often do we kind of make impossible statements in our lives? I mean, it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I think that there's just something about, I often find myself when I visit just kind of wandering in there and just being there, sometimes reading, the many, many inspirational intentions that people have, and realizing, oh, that's like pretty much everything on those plaques are my intentions, right? So there's also that realizing that we're not really that different from everyone else. There's just like one vow, which is essentially to be really alive in this life, right? And it's just kind of, how are we presenting that in different shades? So yeah, so it's a wonderful place if you can.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it seems like just like the grounds of Great Vows sounds like a Great Vow. Sorry, seems like a really special place, and with the Jizo Garden, that I believe is open to people that are not necessarily on retreat. I think you can just go there.
Well, and it is, just so you know, it is actually filled with the ashes of people. So it's a memorial garden. So every few months they do a ceremony for children who have died. So it's literally filled with children, and the sorrow of parents or people who've lost young people. And so it's this incredible place because it's a memorial garden, but it's so whimsical. Like, that's also a very interesting experience. A place of what you would consider to be a lot of grief is also this place of incredible joy and sort of lightness and magic, like, because they have these little statues. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're poking out, like, out of behind trees, and it really does feel quite marvelous, that place. So that is interesting in and of itself, that you can take something so sad and make something so beautiful and light from it.
Yeah. And it seems like, and I know that there are remembrance ceremonies that happen there as well. Maybe during those memorial times, and yeah, there's some people, there are some pictures, and there's some like way of maybe adorning a Jizo statue with elements of the child's life, whether it be like a bib or like a hat or maybe there's some stitching that happens for the Jizo itself that's more of like a remembrance. It seems like an extremely powerful place. And that in conjunction with the Shrine of the Vows, it just seems like there is something very powerful about place. It's just like the place of it. And and it's an amazing thing. I mean, I don't know how many places out there have that woven into the grounds, just out of pure inability of access. Just if you live in Manhattan, maybe that's kind of a hard thing to do, New York City. But just it's a wonderful thing to be able to allow people access to. And I know that so your physical experience, your physical ability to be present at Great Vow is like maybe 4 to 5 to 6 times a year. But what do you do in the meantime? Like how do you maintain, or how do you do you go elsewhere, or is there a community where you are now that you kind of sustain your practice with?
Yeah. So luckily my partner is a practitioner, so we do our daily sitting together. And there's a community here which is a different lineage. They're part of Suzuki Roshi's lineage, so that's different from Chosen and Hogan's lineage, but it's a Soto Zen group. So I try to sit with them once a week because yes, it is important actually to have Sangha. And but yeah, I do feel sad that I'm at such a distance from the community that I've really been connected to for many years. And that is a challenge, actually. But in some ways, it's interesting, right, to not get dependent on anything either. I love monasteries just as a thing. They're, like you say, it's a place with a huge amount of power. Simply walking into it does something to your mind because it's holding a practice field that thousands of people have practiced there. And so it literally changes the atmosphere. And so one can get sort of almost dependent on that as a lay practitioner, to kind of like, I need to go there because I get an injection of inspiration, or I need to kind of be in touch with the mothership. But the truth is that could all fall apart, right? So this thing of how do I actually make this real in my own life without all these other things, is also important, and I find that's like the Theravada, and I have many friends who are Theravadan practitioners in the Thai forest lineage. And so I find that they have a very interesting thing of sort of coming together as a group, but also encouraging solo practice. And I can see why there's a real importance actually in having your own practice on your own. It's absolutely wonderful to practice with other people, but you can't be dependent really on that either. And so I'm kind of in an interesting position where I'm forced into actually a lot of solo practice. And I think it's challenging, but I'm sort of grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really wonderful perspective that you put on it, where you kind of you recognize a precedent for it, for that solo quality that you definitely miss out. Maybe you have like a feeling of like wanting to be somewhere else with Great Vow, to be on that powerful place in that monastery, that you feel drawn to it, and yet you also kind of understand the context of your life and how it actually kind of there is a precedent in another tradition that says, well, the being where you're at, being more or less solo or isolated from community, from community in a very intimate way, could actually be of significance for your practice. And I was wondering too, what have you noticed with your sitting with your husband or your partner versus just the two of you, versus sitting with a whole hall full of people? Like I was just wondering, like what is there something about those two contexts that reflect certain elements of each other, or is there something that is a different dynamic that is powerful in one way or the other?
Well, I mean, I guess it's in both situations, I'm having to commit to someone other than myself, which in my life is always easier than just being me. So it's like, oh, someone else is turning up to sit. I'll go and support them. That's a real easy inspiration for me to practice, to support other people. Harder to kind of just build up the enthusiasm just for myself. Of course, it's nice to sit in some ways with people that you don't know, or that you don't need to know in that way, that you're knowing in kind of a much more fundamental way in silence. Of course, your partner, as you probably know, you've got all kinds of things that just from your life together. So it's not as clear a kind of palette of sitting. So, both are great. Yeah. Obviously, I'm very lucky to have a relationship that supports my practice, or I look at the conditions of my life and like, oh, yeah, that's also a huge fortuitous circumstance, really, because especially in Zen, like to do a lot of Sesshin is not going to work for a lot of people's relationships unless the other person is a practitioner. So I mean, I know many, many relationships that, have ended or had a lot of trouble because of one person really becoming quite compelled by deep meditation practice and the other person not having an idea what they're doing. And it can become very problematic.
Yeah, it feels like the worlds are kind of they're operating in the same environment. No, I think that's wonderful too to think of being in relation to other people while sitting as support. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's just kind of like, okay, well, if someone's sitting, I also will sit. And there's something really beautiful about like when I do solo sits, which is often, which is just like in my house or something. I forget this, but it's really encouraging to think about when I sit, there's likely somewhere a group of people sitting together, and maybe I just jumped in with that sitting period or that sitting time, whether I know it or not, so there's someone doing it somewhere. So that's a nice thing to kind of remember. And then two, like within your household, I was just curious because I know that mindful eating is a big thing within Great Vow and the Zen community of Oregon, their structure. And I was wondering, do you do that in your house? Do you try to incorporate moments of that or remembrances of doing some mindful eating, or is that something that that you have time for and intention to do when you are during sesshin or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I really do value the practice of oryoki, which is, kind of how that's displayed at ZCO. But I don't eat oryoki at home. Yeah, I mean, I hope that some of the practices around mindful consumption and in every way, have impacted my life. But, it's not like I'm regimented in that way around that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's interesting. One of the things that I do is I look after both my aging parents. And so one of the practices that we do is we make food for them every day. So that is really aided by seeing that as a practice, as opposed to just like, oh, I got to cook for these people again, So it's really interesting. So the preparation of food, or this idea of, okay, like I'm offering this is like, I could offer this to a nun or a bhikkhu or, and that would be kind of a reverential practice that I would take up, with a lot of enthusiasm. Why not for my parents, right? And so these are like really obvious reflections that come from training. Yeah,
it's a very meaningful application of all of that. And what a special thing that you allow yourself to participate in with a really wonderful frame of mind, where it isn't just kind of like another day of doing this over and over again, but just like knowing that this could be a devotional act in a way.
Yeah. I mean, often I'm unsuccessful, but yeah, that's yeah. I definitely have that in the atmosphere somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really special thing. And then two, I wanted to talk about this kind of in a promotional sense. And I know that you are co-leading a November session at Great Vow Zen Monastery from November 10th through the 16th. And I believe a theme of that is around gratitude. And I saw something very special about the description for this session because, and I don't know if this is the case for every session that's done at Great Vows Zen Monastery, but during the week of practice, the people that are attending eat only the offerings brought to the retreat. So there is like a food alms kind of donation basis for what you eat is what has been given. And I was wondering about what if you've done that before, what your experiences have been, or if not, what you're kind of maybe going to anticipate for this upcoming session.
Yeah, no, it's kind of wonderful because people are very generous. Actually, they're very moved to give a lot, and actually, many people who don't even come to the session. So you don't have to, you donate whatever money you want, or you donate food. So it's a donation kind of idea. But there are many people who aren't even sitting the session who will drop off food in Portland or whatever, and it will be taken to the monastery for this period. And so, yeah, I mean, it really connects us, doesn't it, with the history, the roots of the Dharma, which is essentially that people only survived because people fed them, and so I love those kind of connections where I feel like I'm practicing with all the other people that practice, where you really get connected with the ancestors on some very deep level, and I feel like that happens in this session for that reason. It's also really amazing I'm often working in the kitchen with the Tenzo. And I love to see how the Tenzo deals with the creativity of that moment, right? Like, what do you have? How are you gonna, what are you gonna make out of this? And that the kitchen has to kind of come up with this creative way of responding to the materials. Yeah.
Certainly. And there is maybe someone that doesn't have a great facility in the kitchen, that's coming from me, but being given a bunch of an assortment of things that are not necessarily planned in the sense of what's being given, but in making a menu out of that for mindful eating, there is I'm sure oryoki is kind of a part of that. So and people are really going to be thinking about the food that you're giving them. So there's a lot of attention being given. There's just so much pressure, but at the same time, there is something really. I'd imagine it being a really fantastic opportunity for being in the present moment when you're in the kitchen too, because it's you really have to attend to all of the ingredients that you have. You have to attend to the maybe the nerves or the creative process, basically. That comes up for that.
And the participants have to sort of, if all we get is oranges, everyone just donated that's what we're eating for the entire week. So I think there's a certain amount of trepidation too, maybe in the participants of stuff around food and hunger, and that often becomes a really huge thing in session, when you're sitting for stuff. Are those moments of the meals, right, where you're feeling kind of comforted, you have all your stuff around food, and so suddenly oh God, we're having the same meal again, can become a big deal. But that's the whole point, is right, to see these points where we're really stuck or where we're clinging to a certain thing being a certain way. And so this session really allows people to see, okay, I accept anything that's offered. We don't have sugar. Okay, we're just going to have plain porridge. You don't get sugar. How are you going to deal with that? Right.
Right. And how are you also going to let that sustain your practice too? Are you still going to are you just going to be upset the whole time that you didn't?
Or are you going to be grateful? This is actually food.
Yeah.
This plain porridge is amazing. It's actually what's helping me, get through the day.
Yeah. Right.
So it's
I haven't seen many retreats that explicitly run on a in my experience. I haven't seen it spelled out so plainly about it being the food being what is given. I think it's a really extraordinary and powerful component to the Great Vows offering through the retreats in that way, just of what you are given out of gratitude, out of generosity, is what you are able to consume. And then I want to take a brief moment to just offer a place for just general promotion. If there's anything that you have coming up that you'd want to get some eyes and ears on, whether it's a project or a book or anything that you are participating in that you want people to know about, or if there's something like a foundation or a cause that you'd like to get some people to know about that are doing work that you like. And while you think about that, I just wanted to remind that the upcoming November session with the theme of gratitude is happening from November 10th through the 16th at Great Vow Zen Monastery. And then you also offer dance training and classes at Shakti Dance. And more information about that can be found at shaktidancesociety.com. So if there's anything else that you'd like to share.
I mean, not really. Yeah, I just hope people will explore, come to Great Vow. It's such a wonderful place, and many, many wonderful teachers. So yeah, I hope people can have that experience. Yeah,
certainly. And then my last question would be: do you have any advice for anyone that is walking the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard when you were coming up through it on earlier, and what you would have to have heard as you were kind of moving through this Buddhist journey?
Well, I think, like I say, I think it took me a long time to realize that practice, dharma is not just about, stopping thinking and this kind of or counting breath, or I think that there was this kind of boring aspect to practice that I always found uninteresting, and I really think that that's just a wrong teaching in some ways. That sitting zazen is perhaps one of the most interesting things one can possibly do in a life, and it's just an entrance gate into something extremely compelling and alive and mysterious. And so not to get bogged down too much on these sort of methods or things that you think, or the feeling that it's just a psychological kind of training. Like it's not just, you're not trying to make yourself into a different kind of person. That is not actually what the Dharma is about. I think, that you really need to read a bit deeper than just the kind of Western psychological perspective of the Dharma, because I feel like it has made it into quite a small little box. And for me, that was fairly uninteresting. Yeah.
I love what you said about the practice of sitting as being one of the most fulfilling elements of a life that you can observe and participate in such a deep and profound thing by just sitting and by expressing yourself, but by expressing yourself in that moment. And then thank you for advice to look further and deeper than being just kind of told to be boring.
And also just the focus on dukkha, right? Which seems so much, that really the early Buddhist teachings are a lot about joy and bliss. And, we've forgotten the whole sukha part of the teaching. So, it's not balanced, in kind of the view. Like we really sit to enjoy our lives, It's not just all about, recognizing, oh, this is suffering, this is challenging. Yes, but from that's just one step, right? It's just the first noble truth. It's not the rest of the noble truth, right? So I feel like people get stuck on the first noble truth. Yeah.
Absolutely. Enryu, thank you so much for speaking with me today. This is such a treat, and what a wonderful way to come to a close. It's just a reminder of the joy of practice. I mean, that really is such a fantastic thing. And also too, something that we began our conversation with more or less was the sense of practice as giving, as generosity, and of gratitude. And then we come to a close with just kind of sitting because you get to, sitting because you get to be.
Wonderful. What an opportunity that your life allowed you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing those, because I was speaking from my personal experience. I certainly can focus on the dis-ease of things. And so thank you for the reminder to look on the other elements of practice and the joyful moments of it. And thank you for taking your time today to speak with me. And I wish you the best on your upcoming session. And thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a fascinating story, and yeah, I just am greatly appreciative.
Thank you so much for being interested. Yeah, I really appreciate being asked to share. Thank you.